Hey guys, this is Atul from team K21 Academy, and in this video, I'm going to talk about how to prepare for what questions you're going to expect in the interview based on the job description that's being you are given using ChatGPT or Bard. We will also get help from the ChatGPT itself as well, how to answer those questions. Also, just a fair warning in terms of the questions we are going to discuss or the way we are going to discuss, you may not get exact questions in the interview, but you will get the context of what to expect or some idea and how to prepare yourself so you feel confident about the whole interview process as well. Now, also inside the video, that video has been taken from our AWS job oriented program. So you might see some references like this where I'm talking about this whole path or the module. So please skip or ignore that. If you don't know a particular topic, if you want to have the answers, let me know in the comment section. So we'll add some more context or references from our blog or free content available on the portal for you. One final thing on this part using ChatGPT, one final thing is about that as a bonus, if you stay till towards end, I'm going to give you also two important questions you can get always or you will always expect in the interview and how to answer them. One at the start and one at the end and how to answer them as well. So make sure you ask. Also, this document which I'm referring, that will be in the comment section or either comment or description section or both the places wherever you're watching this video. So let's go and look at this. What or how to identify the interview questions based on the job description that you are applying or you're appearing for or you've applied for using ChatGPT. So the first and most important thing that you're going to do is you're going to use ChatGPT or Bard in order to identify what questions you can expect for an interview. And for that, like whatever I'm going to talk about here is based on a job description. So and there's a high probability or when you're searching for interview questions, you should always look for or interview questions will be based on the job description or the problems that an employer is facing or a particular role for which they are hiring. So the best thing you're going to do is you're going to go to the job portal. I've just picked up a job portal from here based in UK. For example, you search for AWS and this is the role you're going to pick. You're going to select this entire job description right from maybe begin here looking for expertise in building CICD pipelines on AWS DevOps Engineer and you select all roles and responsibilities till this particular point. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take this and put in the chat GPT with a prompt like saying that, hey, I'm applying for this AWS interview with the below job description. You act as an interviewer and ask me the actual questions you could ask me based on this below job description, or like act as an interviewer and ask me these questions. Now I've already prompted this in AWS in this chat GPT. And for those, I think I've already done a video in terms of what is chat GPT, just chat.openai.com, very straightforward. And what you're asking is a prompt. So ask this prompt based on the job description and you will get a list of all the questions. Now, one pro tip, you can even ask ChatGPT to say that, hey, if an interviewer is going to ask me this particular question in an interview, in how should I answer, and that will give you the full explanation as well. But don't just do here. Make sure that whatever you have covered inside the program, you understand that and use that opportunity to or go back to these theory part and hands-on lab and project work which we have done to actually apply for those particular jobs. So based on that, I've already done, and this is the questions I've got. And what I've done is I've categorized these interview questions based on also a different role. Again, these questions might differ. I repeat again, but this will give you a good idea about what kind of a questions you can expect. Or if even if an interviewer doesn't ask you, you may mold them, you can take them based on these questions as well. So the first question, take an example, given that, could you please, there are two questions. I've already mentioned about two questions which you should always prepare. And I'll give you the link as well. Again, repeat that at the end is tell a bit more about yourself. So you know what to answer. There's a separate video which I've covered in past on how to answer that particular question. And I'm assuming you've already done those parts. And now you're going to begin with the technical interview round. And in that, you're going to ask, hey, could you please provide an example of a situation where you had to identify and mitigate risks, security issues, and bottleneck in AWS architecture? Now, this is more about a cloud related to cloud architecture or cloud architects, or if you're doing for a senior leadership or senior position. Because profile looks or the job description was more about how to mitigate, or one of the requirement was that you should be able to mitigate, identify risk and mitigate them, identify any security issues, any bottleneck, design and improve the architecture. If you're in a junior level, you may not get this kind of a question, but it'll give you, and later I'm going to tell you what might be with respect to the more entry level jobs or administration jobs as well. But prepare yourself, or at least um, you can take your interviewer in that scenario. Now I'm going to read out these some questions, and then we'll go in the later part. I'm going to answer them one by one, these questions as well, or answer to these questions as well. So that's question number one. Now, if your profile looks about more about monitoring, administration, health checks, those things, then you can expect a question like, what monitoring tools and practices do you prefer to use when ensuring the health and optimizing efficiency of on AWS? Now, the interviewer may not ask in that directly like this manner, but they might say, hey, we need someone to monitor. So can you tell me a little bit more about what all monitoring tools you might have used, making sure that system was active, it was efficient on implementation. So we'll talk about these some monitoring tools, on what monitoring tools that are available, on and how to answer those kind of a questions as well. We'll pick up the questions and answers. I'll explain these separately in a minute. Yeah. Then another question, if you're applying for a CI/CD or DevOps kind of a roles, if the job description talks about CI/CD, which is a continuous integration, continuous delivery deployment, what tools have you worked on and how you've contributed to the automation of infrastructure deployment and management? Now, I'll explain again. Let's suppose this is a question you have probably around DevOps CI/CD here. So if I look at on the answers below, and you will share this document as well on here. So let me go back on this particular question here, here in a minute here. So this is a question here, answer to that CI/CD tools. Now there are different CI/CD tools like Jenkins, Circle CI, GitLab CI, whatever, or AWS DevOps CI, or Pipeline CI CD, or Azure DevOps. So whatever you've used, you can mention that. As a part of this program, we've also done, as a part of this AWS job-oriented program, we explain the CI/CD tools. Let me show you first of all where to refer to that CI/CD tools. So I think we've covered this in module, let me see, module 12, AWS DevOps CI/CD tools and pipeline, where we covered things like uh, code commit, code build, code deploy, code pipeline, and also some extensive hands-on labs like working with code commit, building application using code build, deploying application using code deploy, pipeline, AWS code star, all those things in CI/CD. So make sure, if you have not done, go and look at these. This is another related to DevOps tools we have covered: code commit, code build, like, and this whole pipeline where you have an environment of dev environment. There you're using this code commit, build, and deploy to deploy in a blue-green deployment. There is a project work, or if you have not yet seen, you will see a project work related to blue-green deployment. So make sure you understand and you complete that particular project in order for you to answer the questions like this. So make sure you complete module 12 CI/CD and do some project work which are available on the portal for you. So this is just one example. Let me go through these questions first, and in the later part, I'm going to go or maybe explain them. I'll toggle between these and I'll come back to these questions as well. Anything which I find interesting, I'll come back and toggle between these question answers as well. So that's one. Next is, can you explain difference between Elastic Beanstalk and AWS Kubernetes service? Now, for that, you need to understand what is containers, what is Kubernetes, and how Kubernetes is implemented on AWS Cloud Managed Kubernetes. Again, there's a module inside the program. Also, Elastic Beanstalk, which is in web app, where you can deploy different kind of a underlying platform on which you can deploy the applications. And they're also asking you which one you would be picking and what scenarios you'll be picking, this which one you're picking. So just I'll quickly do a 30,000 foot view or bird's eye view of what is difference between Beanstalk and Kubernetes EKS. And then I'll also focus, and I want you to go back to the modules, respective modules, so you can understand and learn these better. So Beanstalk is a platform that AWS provide on which you can deploy an application. And behind the scene, you can always do a different application framework like Java, Python, PHP, Ruby, Node.js, Docker, whatever you have, you can build applications using Elastic Beanstalk. whereas EKS, which is Elastic Kubernetes Service, is a Kubernetes implementation on AWS Cloud, which is EKS. Now, there are differences. Both have differences. Maybe worth reading this document. We'll share the link. So, what are the different, depending on what kind of application you want to build, there are pros and cons of each of them. If you're going for a containerized application, which is on Kubernetes or managed by Kubernetes, you might want to go on a EKS. Otherwise, depending on, as I said, in the design, when we are going to cover these, you will understand more better into these, but read these answers as well. Now, in order for you to understand the differences, you need to know these topics well. So you need to go through module 9 and module 3. Module 9 is, sorry, 13, which talks about automation configuration management, and module 13 is about container services. So let me go back. So module 9 is about automation config, where we talk about Elastic Beanstalk. There's a lab as well when deploying an application in Elastic Beanstalk, and then immutable deployment on Beanstalk, and then blue-green deployment on Beanstalk. You'll do all of them so you understand Beanstalk. Then on module 13, we'll covering EKS Elastic Kubernetes Service, where you'll be creating a EKS cluster and deploying applications. So you understand these deployments, and when you do it, you will understand the differences as well. So you can answer this question very well in the interview. Or even if you can expect a lot of questions on EKS depending on the job requirements. So worth going through those labs, EKS labs as well. Now another one, next one you might get is this is again for cloud architect. If you're working as a cloud architect or admin role, if you are, most of these times, again, if you're doing a performance tuning, optimizing cost, the customer has written that one of the role might be making sure that costs are effective, you're using resources wisely, or a design, definitely design and architecture related questions or role. Then how do you ensure that resources are used efficiently while maintaining system performance and reliability wise? So there is a module about costing, the well-architected framework, the design related frameworks. You should be looking at that. So let's go down and look at those questions related to how would you answer this particular question. So again, this is related to more about, as I said earlier, design related question, but in order, rather than directly saying I'll do this, you always need to understand the organization, the what are the business goals, and your like security, and whatever business need takes the most important precedence, and then making sure that the applications RTOs, recovery time objective, RPOs, are met while reducing the cost as well, and making the system efficient as well. So you first and most important, probably you would want to start with and saying, I'm going to understand what are the organizational goals, what are the requirements, what are some of the important areas where the focus or the cost optimization might be. And in order to optimize the cost, you're going to first look at, there's something called as cost AWS Cost Explorer, that will give you the organizational wide expenses in terms of what services are using, what app, like how much money. And then you go and identify the resources, which is a test dev environment, prod environment, which one is using how much amount. Then AWS has another service called Trusted Advisor that will give you the recommendations on costing. That tool can identify this tool. Again, will have a lesson on Trusted Advisor, similarly on Cost Explorer as well. Then you probably might look at architectural differences. You might be, for example, overutilizing you might be having a lot of virtual machines where you can run with containers. That might have some implications on maybe a higher cost to begin with, but over a period of time, you might reduce the cost as well. So a lot of these tools, including monitoring tools, will give you a lot of reports which will tell you how you can optimize the cost as well. So for example, any application you're not using much, VMs are up, but not any running, hardly any CPU being used, it might recommend you to shut them down as well. These are very basic things, but you add a lot of such things will come very, very handy. Now, there's a right size of EC2 instances. You can give them some quick wins. Like for example, you've used a lot of times, you've noticed that not right size EC2 instances are used, or wherever for dev environment reserved instances, or where you know that you're always going to get that much CPU, or you need that many EC2s, then you can reserve the instances, which will be much more cost effective as well. Now, snapshots, point in time recovery, backup and restore, a lot of those things might be eating up unused space you've not never touched or you've never used backups, and you have a lot of copies of backup, same backup. I've seen a lot of the such cases as well. So prepare some if the job description require about cost effectiveness, uh, design related things. You'll have a lot of cost relative questions you might be asked. So prepare for them as well. Now, there's another tool, CloudWatch, which will give you how much resources are being tracked, used, performance, etc. as well. So CloudWatch is a good as well on. And for to answer a lot of these things, you can look at module 4, which is about AWS EC2 instances, security module, and then high availability in disaster recovery, which is module 11. So let me talk about that. So if you go on to the previous module, then this, so in your compute will give you all the CPU related savings that you can get, or what kind of a application you need to be running, what kind of a, whether it's a containerized, whether it's web app, whether it's a database also, what kind of a databases you can run, you will save a lot of money over there. But the important thing is that there is something called as well-architected framework that's covered in module 11 that covers costing, as well as the security, as well as optimal performance. All those things you'll be using in module 11. There's some of the tools you'll be using in module 10 as well, like Trusted Advisor, and a lot of other tools which you might be looking at in module 10 as well. So have a look at that particular part as well. So let's go back on to the questions as well now. So as I said, the other best thing you can do is you can simply take this question and say, just ask in ChatGPT and say, how would I answer these questions? And a lot of these things, when you go to do hands-on lab, these things will become much more clear. I've done it so many times now, and I know now because I've executed some of these, costing, pricing, or how to deploy the systems. Because I've done it a number of times, I can say it on top of my head. Similarly, when you're doing these labs or the project work, then things will become much more clear for you. Now, if you're a database administrator, or if they expect you, if there's a requirement of databases, whether it's a relational database, anything to do with data or data analytics, then you might expect questions as well and say, tell a little bit more about what kind of a database applications or databases you were deploying or have deployed, or what's your experiences with databases. How did you decide and reach out to a particular type of database? That's more on an architecture side, but there might be some on technical side as well, and say, hey, if you're deploying, what are the common issues you might encountered when you're doing backup and restore, or how do you handle, for example, what kind of a architecture was there when you deployed databases on cloud? What kind of a databases you had as well? So that's pretty much a lot of such questions around that as well you might be asked. Then um, another one, security, again, more about security administration. They want to make sure that if you're managing their cloud environments as an administrator, as an a DevOps guy, as an ops guy, as an architect, you're taking care of security secrets and sensitive information. How do you handle that sensitive information or data on for applications on AWS applications? Or what are the services tools do you use for securing secret management? Again, there's a dedicated module about this. So let's go back and look at what are the tools available, so that when you understand, when you look at, if you've gone through the program, then go back again in depth. Or if you're yet to go through, make sure you focus on that particular modules. In order to handle the sensitive information or configuration of data, sensitive configuration of data inside AWS application, now I think you will begin with saying that not to hard code any secrets or sensitive information inside your code or any configuration file. Keep it in a secret management. We'll cover that. We'll see that. So there's something called a secret manager where you have all the sensitive information and make sure that encrypted. You have AWS and supplied encryption method, or you can use your own custom encryption method as well. Make sure you rotate these security keys as well. So AWS has a lot of features like identity and access management. We covered it, I think, in module 3. Users, groups, identity and access management. There's secrets management. There's a key management service which to keep your encrypted keys as well. There's a parameter store. There's an audit trail. Audit trail will be to see making sure that whatever you are doing, it tracks auditing. So audit trail, make sure that you have a all the configuration management tools, auditing of those. You are implementing the security best practices. There's also, if applicable, you make sure that you apply the um, HIPAA or PCI or DSS compliant, you adhere to those sensitive information as well. Now, also making sure that you mentioned that we'll be training and on a regular basis the developer team, and making sure that you are AWS on time to time keep suggesting the like basically security announcements. So make sure you follow those security announcements as well. The important thing for is that there's a module 10. Let me go back to this module 10. That's where we're going to look at module 10. That if you look at all the security practices like web application firewall, that's mainly for an application front-ending or front-ended by a WAF so that it protect you from a distributed denial of service attack. But that's if the question is related to sensitive data, then you're going to look at things like KMS and a lot of other tools that you're going to learn in module 10 as well. Now, another question might be like, let's suppose, describe a situation where you needed to implement a zero downtime deployment or updated an application on AWS where downtime, you couldn't afford the downtime. So what techniques AWS service provide for you for situation like when you're doing you can't afford a downtime. Now again, for there are so first thing you're going to do is it will depend on what kind of applications you have. But so let's suppose from an AWS point of view, there is a AWS has in the app Beanstalk, they provide blue-green deployment methodology. Now we have a blue-green deployment project work that you might have done or are going to do inside, where you're going to use blue-green deployment to deploy your application on Elastic Beanstalk. Then they have one of the component you'll be using in order to make sure that your application uh, from a user end user point of view never go down is the load balancer. There's a load balancer you'll be putting in front of the multiple application nodes so that a one request is going to the one application server, and basically you need to maintain you need to modify or you need to update that configuration. The request will go to the second node, and load balancer will always divert to the traffic to one the available node, and the other node is basically you're using to apply some changes as well. There's also auto scaling feature. There's a canary release. A lot of these things we have covered in module 4, which is elastic compute, as well as automation and configuration management. Let me show it to you on module 9, where we looked at automation and configuration management. Again, cloud formation was for automating the infrastructure build, but we deployed using elastic beanstalk um, on blue-green deployment, and there's a dedicated project work as well you should be looking at. Now, so these are some of the things or questions I've covered on a very high level view. But I think the most important thing which I want to reiterate is that whatever questions you're going to get, no one can guarantee, including me or anyone, that what kind of a questions you're going to get. But questions will be based on what's given in the job description. So let's suppose this is a job description. Interview questions might be different. If let's suppose the question is the role is about AWS solution architect and they have very small these requirements, then you'll be asked on based on this. You can ask questions. What you can do is you can go to ChatGPT and say, hey, I'm applying for this AWS interview questions. Um, Go and give me the interview question based on this job description. It'll give you a good idea about, at least you'll feel confident that, or even if they don't ask the questions like that, you can mold your interview based on and say, hey, I've done some of this work which probably this profile might require as well. And then again, I repeat one more time. I think I've said multiple times now that you can even ask ChatGPT for these answers as well to go much more in depth as well. So I hope that makes sense. Whatever is the answers, I've just given a very bird's eye view. Make sure that you go and read this document. and any questions you have, leave them in the comment section so that we can respond as well. We're going to create more and more interview questions like these based on different scenarios. If you're a beginner level, what kind of a questions you can ask? If you're a mid level, what questions you can be asked? And if you're more advanced, more senior role, what kind of a questions being asked? If it's more about security, more as well. So we'll bring more and more. This was more about a little bit more on the architecture side, more on a little bit senior side, role side, but we'll go a little bit junior as well. So let me know your feedback in terms of any other suggestions you have. Did you like it? Do you want to see another thing? Put it in comment section and make sure that you, most important thing is you understand these concepts, do the hands-on lab, do the project work, and you will start feeling more and more confident about these interview questions. If you don't understand all, don't worry right now. You can learn all this. Now coming back to the two questions you can always expect, as I promised at the start. The first question you will always begin with is, hey, tell a bit more about yourself. Now, this is the question you should always prepare very well, and you're going to prepare and you're going to answer them based on the what's being advertised in the job description. You keep it short, quick, probably under a minute or two, and then flip the question and ask and say, hey, I've done a lot of work related to this, and this is in a short, crisp video, but anything specific that you want to ask me about that will help me in tailoring or that a job description require, and that way you can mold that interview in very, very important. Now there's a more in-depth version of this. This will be somewhere in already published on our YouTube channel. So watch that, or we'll link it in the description or comment section. We'll a little bit more depth one as well. The second question is very, very important. I love this as well, saying that at the end they ask you, hey, do you have any questions for us? And this is very powerful, and say, based on everything that we have discussed today. Now, um, you ask and say, thanks for giving me this opportunity, and say just one question, and say, based on everything that we have discussed today about my background and my experience, is there any reason why you wouldn't offer me this job? Very, very powerful question. When my mentor first told me that, I was a little bit uncomfortable. Should I ask it or not? But trust me, it works every time. How to answer, why to do. Again, I've covered a separate video covering these two questions, so we'll put it comment. But I want to give that hint because every time I ask, like we prepare for interviews in our job-oriented program, we always recommend you to prepare that very well. Now, it might be very offensive. Some might think, but trust me, this will give an opportunity for you to, if there's any objection in into your mind, you will have an opportunity to answer and clear their questions as well. Um, so, um, so and then you can tell if an employer, say for example, they say, hey, I don't think we have a right now, we're looking for a little bit more experienced person. Give them that how you can get a little bit more experience, or what makes you right fit for that particular role. Trust me, even if at least you will come to know where the gaps are, and you can focus on the next interview. That's number one. Number two is that, let's suppose you have something you missed in interview, or you wanted to do a different view, at least you will get an opportunity to answer. Very, very important. Make sure there's a more detailed version which I've done somewhere in the video. You'll find them in comment section. But let me know what do you think about these two questions, or any other question that comes into your mind that you've been always asked, and how would you answer those questions as well. So that's pretty much two questions from my side.